The time has come. Execute Order 66.
It has been well said that a little impatience often ruins great plans. This is exactly what went wrong with the sequel we got to Man of Steel called Batman vs Superman. This movie was only made as a reaction to certain events that occurred prior to and after the release of Man of Steel, and it's plainly evident that the movie we got was inferior to the first outing by an altered vision. I stated in my last video there was plenty wrong with this movie. This is true as the movie was not from the same creative forces that made the first one. This movie was constructed from inputs of many other creative individuals that had been brought in by Warner Brothers to steer the ship in the right direction. I understand I'm being a bit vague, so I hope you will join me as we delve into a tale of studio cowardice, greed, wrong-headed thinking, and impatience that led to the creation of the film intended to be the sequel to Man of Steel. But let's set the table straight with this fact. BVS is not a sequel to Man of Steel. BVS is Warner Brothers forcing a filmmaker to skip over carefully laid groundwork to build a tapestry of films in order to make the same money as their competition at Marvel. Furthermore, I want you to understand something important. Most of the failure of this movie can be laid at the feet of Warner Brothers and not Zack Snyder alone. It's the equivalent of laying the entire decline of Star Wars at the feet of Rian Johnson and not Disney, the studio that bastardized it. If you believe a multi-billion-dollar studio will finance a movie for hundreds of millions of dollars and give the entire creative control to a director without having a say in its production, then I have a nice gold mine in Alabama to sell you. Yes, there are certain directors in Hollywood that get the carte blanche to do whatever they want in a movie. These are the Nolans and Spielbergs of the world. This is based on their long-established track record, prestige, and box office history. The main reason Man of Steel happened was because of Christopher Nolan's support in it, and this allowed Snyder to bring his vision to the screen. Unfortunately, by the time of BVS, these favorable circumstances were non-existent. To give you the context in which BVS became the sequel we got, I would have to take you to the beginning. Originally, Man of Steel was supposed to be released in December of 2012, but would later be pushed to 2013. The year 2012 was an absolutely crowded field for superhero movies, and Warner Brothers felt the box office might be affected. First, we had the cinematic event called The Avengers. The movie was absolutely massive, making over $1.5 billion in cinemas. I liked the movie, but that was not the best superhero film that year. That title belongs to a smaller budget movie called Chronicle, but more on that later. We also had the final chapter in the Nolan Batman films, which made over $1.1 billion, again raising the bar. So it's fair to say that Warner Brothers was expecting Man of Steel to make $1 billion. But given the reaction the movie received, this figure was not made and the studio perceived it as an underperformance, although the box office alone was nearly $700 million without even counting DVD sales. So like most studios, Warner Brothers wanted a formula that would earn them that quick billion at the box office again, and this is where the plot goes off the rails. There were many rumors about the movie that was supposed to be made after Man of Steel, the most prominent one being Man of Steel 2, with the possible villains being Brainiac and Lex Luthor. We would also have got a new Batman film fleshing out the universe before an inevitable movie like BVS was made. But all these plans were scrapped, and the rush was on to get to a tentpole movie like the Justice League to rival the Avengers. Rather than Snyder's original vision, Warner Brothers decided to keep its color palette and retool their entire movie franchise. The original screenplay by Man of Steel was written by David S. Goyer, with some input from Christopher Nolan. In BVS, Chris Terrio was brought in by Warner Brothers to retool the Goyer script with more emphasis on the Batman character. Goyer would leave the DCEU claiming scheduling conflict. In 2023, he would spill the beans on why he really left. He would reveal that Warner Brothers were pressuring them to give them their own version of the MCU Avengers on a consistent basis. I will link this article in the description if you want to read it, as it's a fascinating insight into a deeply dysfunctional studio. And if you are wondering why it's taking him so long to speak out, just remember that there are things called non-disclosure agreements, and you would be an absolute idiot to break one with a studio with teams of lawyers on retainer. The original script that was heavily focused on the repercussions of the distraction in Metropolis and the courtroom drama that was being manipulated by Lex Luthor will be kept, but tacked onto the script will be elements from Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, The Death of Superman, and the Injustice storyline. Furthermore, the studio was also expecting core members of the Justice League to be introduced in this movie to pave way for their future film. This is what led to the cameos in the form of CCTV and found footage films, which were incorporated terribly in this movie. The movie we got in the end was a tonal and narrative mess. There is no central theme of substance here, and while there are themes, they are buried under a clunky and messy plotline. Certain important elements that would have made the film easy to comprehend are missing from the theatrical release of this film. The extended cut of this movie, which adds about 31 minutes of extra footage, will improve on the film's comprehension. but there are still scenes and storylines here that would confuse the majority of people. So while some problems are fixed, others are glaringly present. As a side note, Warner Brothers were okay with Matt Reeves' Batman being over 3 hours, yet refused the same treatment for Zack Snyder. Talk about double fucking standards. This movie suffers from the same disease the James Gunn movie suffers from, with its lack of comprehension and a non-focus on our main Superman and core characters. Funny enough, Gunn's Superman was also a reaction to the Snyderverse, but I digress. BVS is a set piece of cool action scenes, edgy content, and more edgy dialogue, and finally an ultimate conclusion to show power levels. This is all honestly what the movie becomes in the end, a big advertisement courtesy of Warner Brothers for fans to expect the next product called the Justice League. In actual fact, Batman vs Superman is not a single movie, it's rather a combination of 3 movies. The first one is the Batman vs Superman, which would have been great if the narrative was focused on that. The second is the studio-mandated Dawn of Justice, which was a shortcut means of bridging the 5-year gap between Marvel and the DCEU. And the third is the Injustice plotline that was woven in here by, I'm guessing, Snyder to show you what to expect from his universe. This serves to only confuse the audience in the end, but more on that later. Going into the release of this movie, it did not help that Avengers Age of Ultron, which was released in 2015, made $1.4 billion. Warner's expectations for BVS was also in the billion range. This ultimately meant that if the movie didn't make that figure, then they could blame it as a failure on Snyder. When the movie was released, the reception was quite negative. This was due to the incomprehensible theatrical cut and critics again not liking the dark tone of the DCEU. The movie will make about $874 million, which was a bit short of Warner's target. The fallout will be placed on Snyder, tarnishing his reputation. Around the same time, Jeff Johns will be promoted to head of DC Films along with John Berg, with the hopes that they will be the Kevin Feige-like figures in the DCEU. This I feel was a serious mistake, as Jeff Johns may know comics, but he doesn't know shit about movies. If you think Justice League was simply a misstep, then understand that this is the same guy that served as producer and creative consultant for Green Lantern in 2011. We will get to that third of a movie one day. Moreover, there were a number of people also fighting for control over the DCEU at this point. This included Deborah and Zack Snyder, and some studio executives. Hence, with so many chefs in the kitchen, the idea of a cohesive vision was a pipe dream. But it's a known fact that Jeff Johns would be the guy to bring in Joss Whedon. This was what led to the cinematic abortion in 2017 called the Justice League, but more on that later. The premise for BVS also serves as the context in which the movie was made. This is the destruction of Smallville and Metropolis. This was brilliant as at the time, Marvel films had these bombastic action scene endings with no repercussions to it. It was until the Russo brothers came in and made it a tangible plotline for Civil War. At the time, the critics claimed that Snyder was doing it in retrospect while Marvel had a plan. I really don't know what to tell you if you don't understand the ill will that was being heaped on Snyder here, but I digress. Given this context, the movie also gives us a clear motivation and consequences for our 3 players in this film. This refers to Superman, Batman, and Lex Luthor. There's consequences in regards to how the destructive event had impacted them, and in understanding that, we will see how it motivates their actions in the story. The movie opens with Batman's backstory for a reason. We see how his parents were gunned down in the streets as he helplessly watches. We also witness him falling into a well full of bats as a child. He tells us that he hoped the bats would have carried him out of the well as a means of ascension. But he knows that's a lie, and we are being shown a lie. Batman is a person very defined by his tragedy, and he has weaponized his own fears and helplessness to inflict that same feeling on criminals in his fight for justice. Batman now has to witness 2 Kryptonians fighting, and again he feels the same helplessness he felt as a child. This is also after the World Engine had destroyed most of Metropolis, including his own building, and harming his employees. And we know what Bruce Wayne does with fear, right? He weaponizes it. And since Clark is the only Kryptonian left after Zod dies, it's inevitable that he will now make Clark a target as he has seen what he's capable of. But this is not the old Batman. He has been changed by life, loss, and years of crime fighting. He now believes that sometimes you must use lethal methods to achieve your ends. He is deeply cynical and ruthless. And in his transformation, he has missed a step. Batman used to be the world's best detective, but he is simply an instrument of fear now in Gotham. His mind state and his animosity makes him a perfect target for manipulation by Lex Luthor. Ben Affleck's performance is brilliant in this film. At the time, most people were making quips that the guy from Jiggly was now Batman, forgetting that Affleck had been in much better films since then and his past did not define him. He sells the fear, anger, and aggression of Bruce Wayne, and his Batman is absolutely dominant and fear-inducing. It's such a shame that we never really got to explore him fully in this film, but I will address that down the line in this video. But there is one controversial point I will address now, the notion that Batman doesn't kill. Well, this Batman is based on Dark Knight Returns, and he absolutely kills in that comic. Other movie adaptations of Batman has also killed. Michael Keaton, whom most people call the definitive Batman, kills. Christian Bale's Batman killed twice, Ra's al Ghul and Harvey Dent. If a lie by omission is a lie, then a death by refusing to save is also killing. This logic is applied to doctors and nurses for a reason. If we are going to apply comic law and morality, then we might as well be consistent. I have already told you I don't consider comic books to be sacrosanct. So yes, if a Batman killing helps the narrative, then I'm all for it. And yes, a killer Batman definitely fits the narrative in this movie. It's one of the reasons why Superman tells him to kill the Bat. Another prominent reason being his brutality and tendency to brand criminals. Next, there is Superman. Again, Henry Cavill's performance is subtle and great. He offers here a Superman dealing with the repercussions of the destruction in Metropolis and Smallville. And you also get the feeling that he now understands that he is truly alone in this world, and he is at fault for that. This godlike being had ended his own race of people to protect us, keeping on fighting for humanity and doing his very best to protect our world, yet we still don't trust him. In fact, the world is pretty much split, with some worshipping his power, which he doesn't know how to handle, and others condemning him for not being all powerful enough to prevent the destruction. We get the sentiment of Jonathan Kent's fears that the world was not ready to receive him, and I love that messaging. It's almost as if the filmmakers were making a great comment on the dialogue surrounding this movie, but I digress. The relationship between Lois and Superman here is also beautiful. You feel the realism of it. They love each other, but they also argue. It's human, it's real, it's vivid. As alone as Superman is, he holds on to those that love him closest. This is a reference to Lois and his mother. Yes, I have heard the complaints that he killed a terrorist in the desert. Yes, he does, and I don't care. The man is a terrorist, threatening the life of the woman he loves. I would kill him too. Save me the hypocrisy as if he didn't enjoy the news of a bullet through Bin Laden's head. Most people also complained that Superman was looking sad most of this movie. I'm sorry, did you miss the theme of our ungratefulness and unceasing criticism that had actually been affecting him? Is he supposed to put a fake smile on to make you feel okay? God forbid Superman shows some humanity in this film. You try being criticized for a day and tell me how you will react. He has been enduring this intense criticism and debate because we don't know who else to blame for Metropolis. Yet the point is, he is still willing to save us regardless of this treatment, and he does his duty. There is a point in this movie where Martha sees how much her son is suffering, and she tells him, "You don't owe them a thing." Most people miss that point entirely, forgetting that yeah, he doesn't owe you anything. But he still saves humanity and fights for it endlessly because he wants to protect life. He goes as far as to sacrifice himself to protect us from a greater threat than Zod at the end of this film. Yet again, most people that watch this movie miss that point entirely, but I digress. And finally, Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor here is supposed to be a calculating, devious monster that is absolutely jealous of the power of the Kryptonians, which is what he can't have even though he has all the money in the world. He doesn't believe in the concept of a benevolent God. As he says, no one saved him from his dad's fists and abominations. He had also been touched by the events that went down in Metropolis, and he also perceives Superman as a threat. He has the resources to make his goals achievable and is able to secure the kryptonite, testing it on Zod to see that it works. He sets up Superman in Africa by killing the terrorists with untraceable unique bullets and burning them with flamethrowers. It gives the impression that it was Superman that had used alien technology and heat vision to kill them. He now has to shape public opinion to show that Superman is fallible, and that is by giving the former Wayne employee the wheelchair with the bomb encased in lead underneath it. He is already aware that Superman cannot see through lead. This means that when the Senate House is blown up and people die, more negative opinions will now fall on Superman. And finally, he manipulates events to secure him the most dangerous human he knows, Batman, who possibly has the means and motivation to use the kryptonite as a weapon. Yes, this also means that he knows that Bruce Wayne is in fact Batman. He uses the capture of Martha Kent, who is Clark Kent's weakness, to force him to confront Batman. He also has a fallback plan using the body of General Zod, turning him into an abomination called Doomsday in case Batman fails. I do understand the actions of Lex Luthor as a character throughout this film, but here is the thing. The portrayal we get from Jesse Eisenberg in this role does not scream brilliant mastermind at all. From what we are supposed to get from his schemes, it indicates malevolent, calculating, and charismatic mastermind. Instead, what we are presented with is an angry child with temper issues. I know he is Lex Luthor Jr., but he is supposed to be Lex Luthor in this film. Eisenberg plays the part like Jack Nicholson's Joker, and that seriously drags the movie down. If I'm being honest, a better rendition of such a Lex is Michael Rosenbaum, and a recent one is Nicholas Hoult. Jesse Eisenberg plays Lex Luthor like he played Zuckerberg in The Social Network, and given that the two people he's playing against are giving an excellent performance, his performance became a noticeable problem on numerous rewatches. I remember that at the time, Mark Strong was a preferred actor for the role, and given the kind of Lex Luthor that BVS was going for, he would have been a perfect fit. This is because he had given us a glimpse of such a calculating mind in the Sherlock Holmes movie with his performance as Lord Henry Blackwood. This would have completed the core of the three main characters, and with the narrative focused on them, we would have got something truly great. But alas, that was not the movie we got. Almost everything about this movie that does not work is the studio-mandated Dawn of Justice elements. In my view, all these additions derail the core story, which makes the movie's narrative suffer needlessly. First off, the inclusion of Wonder Woman in this film does not work. I am well aware that she was part of the action scene at the end of this movie, and I'm also aware that her movie came out in 2017 after this movie had been released. Honestly, her inclusion in this film serves no real narrative purpose. It also distracts from Bruce Wayne being changed after witnessing the sacrifice of Clark. That message would have been better received if the two superheroes had taken down Doomsday after they had resolved their own manufactured conflict. She is only here because Warner Brothers wanted us to see her in action and get hyped for her film release after this movie. There is nothing of substance that she contributes that Batman as a detective and fighter couldn't have done. Doomsday is Kryptonian and Batman had kryptonite weapons and arsenal. A good screenwriter would have found a way to utilize it well for the Batman to shine. On that note, the inclusion of the other members of the Justice League here does not work. They are only put in here as a quick way of setting them up in the Justice League movie and for us to get excited. So again, it's just advertisement instead of narrative importance. You are telling me that Lex Luthor knows about all these metahumans, yet Batman, the world's best detective, doesn't? It feels like poor writing, and I am certain that was Terrio's addition to the script. This is because if Batman is made the competent detective that he is, then he is already aware of Superman's identity and is aware of his mother Martha. A different resolution now has to be written for why he gives up on his vendetta, and this naturally could have been Doomsday. As it stands in the original movie, the Martha scene was meant to show that Superman cared about his mother, hence humanizing him to an angry Batman, who himself is traumatized by the loss of his mother and his own helplessness to stop it. So when he realizes that Superman is only there because he's trying to save his mother, he now has a realization and changes his mind. He is now willing to redeem his inner child by rescuing Martha Kent, and in the process prove to Clark that he can trust him. I fully understand the scene, but as it stood, it still did not work. Furthermore, Doomsday's entire electric blast discharge that caused destruction does not work. There is simply no need for it, or even context. An evolving creature does not need to be shown like that, and Doomsday by himself was pretty much a huge threat due to his Kryptonian origins. I do understand that he has his laser vision, and that absolutely works as a show of destruction. And given the fact that he has been amplified, his physical threat alone was more than enough. And finally, the nightmare sequences do not work at all. It only serves as extra action scene for the film's runtime, and as with the previous points, it takes away precious focus from the core of the film. In Man of Steel, Clark Kent's background is told to you in flashbacks, and it helps to flesh out the character to the audience, giving us a deeper understanding. I feel the same could have been done for Bruce Wayne here as a means of showing us how a once idealistic and devoted fighter for justice had lost his ideals. We know in the film that he has suffered a loss, as in the Robin getting killed. But would it not have been better to know the circumstances of that loss? And in the words of Alfred, what turns a good man cruel? But nope, we instead have to deal with a Flash teaser about Lois being the key. I know the Flash has time travel powers and it's not dream travel. I understand this scene can be explained with Bruce's reality being affected by tweaks into the timeline via the Speed Force, as it was in the Flashpoint comics. But it does not work here. This scene only serves as a cool scene to introduce Barry to the audience and leaves a teaser for future events. We also have the second sequence with Batman in the desert fighting against the fascist supporters of a Superman who has broken bad completely. Again, this is a cool scene, but it does not work as we are given no context for it. It only serves to show us an evil Superman in a timeline that is not relevant to this film. Again, I will stress here that the time could have been used to develop the core characters in this film, and while it would please comic book readers and fans, it will only confuse anyone else interested in this film, and this is exactly what happened. When I imagined the concept of a Batman vs Superman movie, it wasn't the world's finest series of comics that I imagined. I am very open-minded to reinterpretations of stories, and with that, I feel like Snyder's take on BVS could have been great. The movie looks absolutely stunning, and the effects and cinematography will age well like most of Snyder's films. But you can like something and still recognize that there are missteps. And with BVS, there are many missteps. But this is nothing new with reactionary filmmaking, as it feels like it's often made to appease and not to tell a clear, concise narrative. A great example of this is Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, which was constructed as a reaction to The Last Jedi. It's fair to say that time will not be kind to that film at all. Under all the mess that was made of this film was the embers of a great movie that would have stood the test of time. But it's unfortunate that in this reality, we didn't get that, and sometimes you just have to take it as it comes. There is still much to enjoy about this film if you take it as its own unique creation, and without a doubt, there is much fun to be had with it. Personally, I have rewatched it plenty of times, and with that flaws in mind, I'm still very fond of it. But there is a silver lining to all of this. You see, all the reasons why this movie didn't work was the very same reason why Snyder's Justice League worked so brilliantly. So in a sense, I am glad this movie was made, as it paved the way for the better movie in Zack Snyder's Justice League. But before we get on to that, I'll be taking a look at that shitty rendition from Joss Whedon in 2017, and that fish will be on my table to be gutted next.